Gunfire ripped through the trees before the sun had even finished rising, and General Adanna was already on her knees in the mud, screaming orders through the chaos. Left flank, hold your position. Do not let them push through. A bullet cracked into the tree beside her head. She didn't blink. Her radio man, crouched beside her, was staring at her stomach instead of the battlefield. General, you're bleeding through your vest. That's not blood from the fight. Your water just broke. I know what it is, Sergeant. Focus on your target. General, please, someone else can finish this. No one finishes what I start, she snapped, gritting her teeth against a contraction that nearly folded her in half. Push forward, now. General, the insurgents are regrouping on the East Ridge, her captain shouted. Then we finish this before they can, Adanna growled, hauling herself up despite the fire tearing through her lower back. Advance, advance now. Her soldiers surged forward behind her, and 12 brutal minutes later, the insurgent camp fell. Her battalion roared with victory. And then General Adanna collapsed face first into the dirt, her battalion suddenly screaming a different kind of alarm. Medic! The general is in labor! Get the chopper, now! I'm fine, Adanna gasped, even as 2 soldiers lifted her by the arms. Let go of me. I said, let go. With respect, General, her sergeant said, voice shaking. You're about to give birth in a war zone. Please, let us carry you. She didn't answer. Another contraction stole the words from her mouth.
Get her inside
By
now!
the time the helicopter touched down on the roof of the National Military Hospital, Adanna was barely conscious, one hand still gripping her sidearm out of instinct, the other pressed against her belly, whispering to a child who hadn't yet taken his first breath. Hold on for me, she murmured. Just a little longer. Your mother isn't done fighting yet. If you think that was the hardest thing General Adanna would survive that day, stay with the story, because it was only the beginning. And if stories like this keep you glued to your screen, hit subscribe right now, because what happens next will break your heart before it heals it. Inside the delivery room, 4 people stood witness to a miracle. Nurse Grace, a young intern named Ucha, the attending doctor, and Mama Ifeoma, the cleaner mopping the hallway outside, who paused just long enough to hear the baby's first cry. Push, General, just once more, the doctor urged. I can see him. Adanna screamed through gritted teeth, gripping the bed rail so hard her knuckles turned white. I didn't survive that ambush to lose here, she hissed. Come on, my son, come out and meet your mother. One final push, and the room filled with the sound of a newborn's cry. It's a boy, General, the doctor said, placing the screaming infant on her chest. A strong one. Look at those lungs. Adanna, exhausted beyond words, laughed and cried at the same time, pressing her lips to his damp forehead. He sounds angry already, just like his mother. What will you name him? Nurse Grace asked, hovering closer than she needed to, her eyes lingering on the child a moment too long. Emeka, Adanna whispered. The one who does great things? A beautiful name, Grace said softly, and for just a second, something like guilt flickered across her face before she turned away to prepare the paperwork. Nobody in that room noticed the black car parked outside the hospital gates, where Colonel Bako sat gripping the steering wheel, his wife beside him trembling with a hope she'd buried years ago. Are you sure about this?
We have to do
his
this
wife
for him.
asked quietly,
I know,
her
Amina.
hands twisting in her lap.
But at what cost?
I'm sure I can't watch you cry over another negative test, Bako said. I'm sure I can't keep pretending I'm at peace with a house with no children in it. Grace has already agreed. Tonight it happens. And if we're caught, we won't be, Bako said. Though his voice betrayed him, Grace has done this kind of thing before. She knows how to make it disappear. That's not comforting, Bako. That's terrifying. So is going home to that empty nursery for another 10 years, he snapped, then quieter. I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. Neither can you know that? His wife said nothing. She only stared at the hospital's lit windows, silently praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. That night, while the ward slept, Nurse Grace slipped into the nursery and lifted baby Emeka from his crib. He stirred but didn't cry, as if some small part of him already sensed he needed to stay quiet. I'm sorry, little one, Grace whispered, hands trembling as she wrapped him tightly. This isn't about hurting you. I promise you'll be loved. She had already prepared the substitute, a stillborn infant from another ward, a tragedy nobody would think twice to compare. Within minutes, General Adanna's real son was in a stranger's car, and a dead child lay in his place. When Adanna woke and asked for her baby, Grace was already wearing her rehearsed grief. General, I am so sorry there were complications overnight. He didn't make it. That's not possible, Adanna said, sitting up too fast, pain shooting through her body. I held him. I heard him cry, "Bring me my son. Bring him to me now. General, please, bring me my son." The doctor entered moments later carrying a small, still bundle. Adanna's scream that morning was heard 3 floors down. Soldiers who had never seen her cry watched their commander collapse over a tiny, still body that wasn't even hers to grieve. "No," she sobbed, clutching the infant to her chest. "No, no, this isn't him. This isn't my son." "General, grief does strange things to the mind," the doctor said gently, glancing at Grace, who stared at the floor. "This is your child. I'm so sorry." The nation mourned with her. The president sent condolences. Newspapers ran the headline, "The general who gave birth in battle loses her son." Only 4 people on earth knew it was a lie, and all 4 intended to keep it that way, forever. At the burial, Adanna stood rigid in her uniform beside a coffin the size of a shoebox. She raised her hand in a slow salute, the same one she gave to fallen soldiers. "Though I held you only once," she said, voice cracking for the first time in front of her men, "you will always be my greatest loss. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you the way I protect my soldiers." One of her officers, watching from a distance, turned to another and murmured, "I've never seen her break like this. Not once in 15 years. "Some wounds don't come from bullets," the other replied. Miles away, in a nursery with soft blue curtains, her real son slept peacefully in a stranger's arms, unaware that his mother was, at that very moment, saying goodbye to a grave that would never truly hold him. 25 years passed. Captain Kofi Bako had grown into one of the finest young officers in the entire military. Sharp, composed, fiercely loyal to the men under his command. Everyone praised Colonel Bako for raising such a remarkable son. "You did well with that boy," an old friend told Bako over drinks one evening. Bako's smile never reached his eyes. "He did well with himself. I only pointed him in the right direction." Nurse Grace, meanwhile, had become wealthy, new houses, imported cars, private schools for her own children. But wealth hadn't bought her sleep. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, she dreamed of a crying infant she could never reach. Worse, walking into any hospital now, for any reason, she swore she could hear a baby crying somewhere just out of sight. "You look unwell," her sister told her once, "like something is eating you from inside." "Something is," Grace admitted before catching herself and changing the subject. General Adanna had never remarried. She poured everything into the military and into every orphan she came across, funding schools, building orphanages, quietly paying school fees for widows' children who never knew her name. The country called her the mother of soldiers. But every year on her son's birthday, she still knelt at that tiny grave. "If only I had heard your voice just once more," she whispered to the stone. "Just once, Emeka. That's all I ask." Her aide, waiting a respectful distance away, finally approached. "General, we should head back. There's a briefing this afternoon, a new officer transfer." "Give me a moment," Adanna said, brushing dirt from the small headstone. "I'm not done talking to my son." "Of course, General." She had no idea that Voice was about to walk directly into her command office. Captain Kofi arrived for his new assignment with sharp discipline and a firm salute. "Captain Kofi Bako, reporting for duty, General." Adanna looked up, and something in her chest lurched, sudden and unexplainable. She stood, extended her hand. "Your file is impressive, Captain. Welcome to my command." Their hands met. Kofi felt heat rush up his arm, a strange tightness gripping his throat that he had no name for. Adanna felt it too, an instinct older than memory. "Thank you, General." Kofi said, his voice unsteady. It's an honor. Outside the office, two sergeants exchanged a glance. She's never warmed to a new officer that fast, one whispered. Maybe he reminds her of someone, the other replied, not knowing how right he was. In the weeks that followed, the bond between them grew in ways nobody could explain. Same stubborn refusal to retreat under pressure. Same habit of tapping two fingers against the thigh when thinking hard. And behind Kofi's left ear, hidden beneath his hairline, sat a small, crescent-shaped birthmark, the kind that meant nothing to anyone who saw it, and everything to anyone who knew what to look for. Colonel Bako noticed the closeness first, and it terrified him. You spend a lot of time with General Adanna, he said to his son one evening, trying to sound casual over dinner. She's a brilliant commander, Dad. Honestly, I learned more from her in a week than I did in years under anyone else. Just be careful how close you get. People talk. Superiors and subordinates shouldn't be that familiar. Kofi frowned, setting down his fork. Why does that bother you so much? You've never cared about military politics before? It doesn't bother me, Bako lied, forcing a smile that didn't sit right on his face. I just worry about your reputation, that's all. My reputation is fine, Dad. Better than fine. For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Bako's fork clattered against his plate. Something about those words, exactly where I'm supposed to be, cut through him in a way his son could never have understood. That night, unable to sleep, Bako sat alone in his study and dialed an old contact in personnel. I need Captain Kofi Bako reassigned, anywhere as soon as possible. The request was denied within 48 hours. General Adanna herself had asked that Kofi remain under her command, citing his exceptional performance. Bako read the rejection twice, his hands shaking. 25 years, he muttered to himself, staring at the letter. 25 years, and now, of all times, she wants to keep him close. For the first time since that night in the hospital, Bako felt the ground shifting beneath the life he'd built on silence. Nurse Grace's world was collapsing in its own way. Her son was arrested for fraud, calling her from a holding cell, voice frantic. Mama, you have to help me. Please get me a lawyer. Get me out of here. I'll do everything I can, Grace promised, though her own hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. Her daughter confronted her the same week. Where did all this money actually come from, Mama? The houses, the cars, my school fees. Don't tell me it was all from nursing. I want the truth. I worked hard for everything we have, Grace said, avoiding her daughter's eyes. You're lying. I can always tell when you're lying. Her daughter grabbed her coat and walked out and didn't speak to her again for weeks. Her husband packed his bags without a fight. I can't keep living with someone who jumps at shadows and cries in her sleep and won't tell me why, he said quietly. Whatever you're carrying, Grace, you're carrying it alone now. Desperate, she went to Elder Namdi, the village elder known for his closeness to the ancestors. I feel cursed, she confessed, though not the full truth. Everything I love is falling apart, one piece at a time. My son, my daughter, my husband, all gone or going. Elder Namdi studied her for a long moment, his old eyes seeing more than she wanted them to. Tell me, my daughter, is there something buried in your past that you have never spoken aloud? Something you convinced yourself no longer mattered? Grace's breath caught. Why would you ask me that? Because guilt has a smell, child, and yours has been following you since you walked through my gate. He shook his head slowly. The ancestors do not destroy a house without first knocking on the door. They have been knocking on yours for many years. You simply refuse to answer. Grace left in tears, his words chasing her down the dirt road. That night, alone in her too large, too empty house, she made a decision that terrified her more than any curse could. I have to tell the truth, she whispered to herself, gripping the edge of her kitchen sink, before it destroys everyone, before it destroys me completely. But someone else had already sensed the walls beginning to close in, and that person had no intention of letting the truth escape. A distorted voice called Grace late one night. Some graves should stay closed, it said, low and cold. Remember what you have to lose, Nurse Grace. Remember it well. Who is this? Grace demanded, her heart hammering. Who is this? The line went dead. Days later, she went to retrieve the original hospital records, records she'd never had the courage to destroy, kept as a strange, guilty insurance policy for 25 years. They were gone. I'm sorry, ma'am. Those files from that period were misplaced during the digitization project, the archive clerk said, avoiding her eyes in a way that told her he knew more than he was saying. There's nothing I can do. Someone took them, Grace said. Someone took them on purpose. I wouldn't know anything about that, ma'am. Then came the news that stopped her cold. The retired doctor who delivered baby Ameka, the last person besides her, Bako, and a long-transferred intern who knew the truth, had died suddenly in his sleep. Natural causes, the report said. Complications from a pre-existing heart condition. Grace sat alone in her kitchen that night, hands shaking so badly she couldn't hold her cup of tea. That's too convenient, she whispered. That's far too convenient. She thought of the phone call. She thought of the missing files. Someone is protecting this lie, she said aloud, to no one, and they're willing to kill to keep it buried. God help me, what have I started? This is exactly the kind of twist that makes this story worth sharing. So, if you haven't already, drop a comment right now telling me what you think Grace should do next, because her next move changes everything. At the annual Harvest Festival, General Adanna returned to her ancestral village, Captain Kofi at her side as part of the honor guard. Drums thundered. Elders sat beneath the great baobab tree, watching the celebration. Among them sat Mama Chidinma, ancient and sharp-eyed, who had personally delivered every child born into Adanna's family line for 3 generations. As Kofi bowed respectfully, the wind lifted his hair, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark behind his ear. Mama Chidinma gasped, hand flying to her mouth. That mark, she breathed, staring as though she'd seen a ghost. I have seen it on every firstborn son of this family, going back to Adanna's own grandfather. It does not appear by accident, child. It is blood speaking. Mama, are you certain? A younger woman beside her asked. It could be coincidence. I have delivered 40 years of babies in this village, the old woman snapped. I do not mistake blood for coincidence. She pulled Elder Namdi aside immediately, her voice low and urgent. Namdi, that young captain, the one standing with General Adanna, he carries the family mark. The same one I've seen since I was a young woman with steady hands. Namdi's eyes narrowed. Pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving, suddenly sliding into place. Grace's confession of guilt, her talk of a curse she wouldn't name, and now this. No leaf falls, he said quietly, without the tree remembering. Something has been hidden here, old friend. Something large. Word of the elder's suspicion, carried quietly through trusted channels, eventually reached Mama Ifeoma, the old hospital cleaner who had watched silently 25 years ago and said nothing, until now. She sat with the investigators, hands folded tightly, an old leather Bible resting in her lap. I have carried this for 25 years, she said, opening the Bible to reveal a folded, yellowed sheet of paper tucked inside. I copied the ward's delivery log myself that same week because something felt wrong to me even then. I was only a cleaner, nobody would have believed me, but I kept it just in case. The lead investigator studied the sheet carefully, then looked up sharply. 2 births, same night, same ward transfer stamp. 1 healthy son, 1 stillborn. And here, the case numbers were altered afterward. Someone changed these records after the fact. I was afraid, Mama Ifeoma said, her voice trembling, now that the secret was finally out of her hands. But I couldn't let it disappear forever, not when a mother has been mourning the wrong child for 25 years. It was enough. DNA testing was formally proposed to General Adanna's command the very next morning. Colonel Bako fought against it in a heated closed-door meeting with senior investigators. This is reckless. This will destroy an already grieving woman for nothing more than an old woman's superstition about a birthmark. Is that what you want? To reopen a wound this deep over a coincidence? With respect, Colonel, the lead investigator replied. We have altered hospital records and as cleaners sworn testimony. This is no longer just superstition. It's still my son you're accusing me of stealing. Baco snapped, then caught himself, horrified at what he'd just said. The room went silent. Nobody accused you of anything, Colonel, the investigator said slowly. Not yet. Nurse Grace, cornered by evidence closing in from every direction, resisted out of raw fear when investigators came to question her. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. I did my job. I delivered babies, that's all. Only General Adanna did not resist when they finally came to her with the impossible suggestion that her son might somehow still be alive. She sat perfectly still for a long moment, absorbing a hope she didn't dare let herself feel. The investigator said gently, We understand if this is too painful. If truth has waited 25 years, she said, her voice steady despite the storm behind her eyes, it can wait one more day. Take the sample. Take it now, before I lose my nerve. The samples were taken that afternoon. 3 days later, in a quiet conference room, the results arrived. General Adanna sat across from the medical officer, Captain Kofi beside her, both of them holding their breath like soldiers waiting for a verdict that could end everything.
The report
General
confirms
Captain,
that Captain
the
Kofi
officer
is your
said,
biological
opening a
son.
thin folder with hands that seemed to move too slowly. The results are conclusive. There is a 99.99% probability of a direct biological match. Captain Kofi Baco is your son. Silence swallowed the room whole. Then it shattered. Say that again, Adanna whispered. General, he is your son, your biological son. Kofi turned to her, his face pale, his breath ragged. That's not possible. My father, I have a father. Kofi, Adanna said, reaching for his hand, her voice trembling in a way none of her soldiers had ever heard. I buried you. I put flowers on your grave every year for 25 years. Then who is in that grave? Kofi asked, his voice cracking. General, if I'm alive, who did you bury? Nobody could answer him. Colonel Baco, summoned moments later and told the results before he even sat down, broke down completely, sinking into a chair as if his legs had simply stopped working. I did this, he confessed, voice trembling. 25 years ago, I paid for the child. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself I was giving a baby a good home. It was theft. Plain, simple theft. Why? Kofi demanded, standing now, his composure finally cracking. Why would you take me from her? From my own mother? Do you understand what you did to her? To me? Because I couldn't bear watching my wife die a little more every single year we stayed childless, Baco said, tears streaming freely down his face. Every test, every failed treatment, every silent dinner where neither of us could speak because the grief was too loud. I am not asking you to forgive me, Kofi. I am only telling you the truth, finally, after 25 years of choking on it. Nurse Grace, brought in separately, fell to her knees the moment she saw Adanna's face. I took your son for money, she sobbed. I delivered him myself. I held him, and I still handed him to strangers for a price. 25 years, General. And I have not slept one full night since. I am so sorry. I know sorry means nothing now. I know it changes nothing. You let me bury a stranger's child, Adanna said quietly, her voice deadly calm in a way that frightened everyone in the room more than shouting would have. You let me believe my son was dead for 25 years. I know, Grace wept. I know what I did. General Adanna could not speak for a long moment after that. 25 years of grief, 25 birthdays at an empty grave, 25 years of a hollow space no medal or title had ever filled. All of it rose in her chest at once, an avalanche she could no longer hold back. She stood slowly and walked to Kofi. My son, she whispered, cupping his face in her hands like she was afraid he might disappear if she blinked. My son, my son, my son. Kofi broke down completely, gripping her uniform like a child half his age, his shoulders shaking. Mother, he said, the word foreign and perfect on his tongue, tasting of 25 years he never knew he'd lost. I'm here, I'm right here. I never stopped looking for you. Adanna sobbed into his shoulder. Even when I thought you were gone, some part of me never stopped. I'm not gone, Kofi said, holding her tighter. I'm not gone, Mother. I'm right here. They wept together for a long time, 25 years of separated grief pouring out in a single unbearable, beautiful moment, while everyone else in the room stood frozen, watching a mother and son finally, impossibly, find their way back to each other. In the days after, Kofi faced an impossible question: reject the man who raised him with love, or reject the woman who bore him in blood and grief. Reporters camped outside the barracks. Fellow officers whispered every time he walked past. Even his own thoughts turned against him at night. You have to choose, a close friend told him over coffee. You can't keep visiting both of them like nothing happened, Kofi. People are asking questions. The military wants a statement. Why do I have to choose? Kofi snapped, more sharply than he intended. One of them is guilty of a crime. The other one is guilty of loving me too much to let me go. Tell me which of those is unforgivable. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying people expect an answer. Kofi sat in silence for a long moment before he finally spoke, more to himself than to his friend. Then I'll give them one they don't expect. He called them both to the same room. His mother in her uniform, still and composed despite everything. His father, unable to meet anyone's eyes, waiting for the sentence he was certain was coming. I refuse to lose either parent because of someone else's sin, Kofi told them, standing between the two people who had shaped his entire existence. One gave me life and grieved me for 25 years without ever giving up hope. One raised me, taught me to be disciplined, taught me honor, even while breaking every rule of honor to get me. I won't pretend either of those things means nothing. I won't. Kofi, Bako said, voice breaking, you don't have to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I didn't say I forgive you, Kofi said quietly. I said I won't lose you. Those aren't the same thing. Forgiveness might take time, but you're still my father, whether I like what you did or not. Colonel Bako, bracing for hatred, broke down completely at his son's mercy instead, sobbing into his hands like a man half his age. General Adanna watched her son with something close to awe. You are stronger than I ever was, she told him quietly. I don't know if I could have done what you just did. You raised me to lead with my head, not just my anger, Kofi said, even though you never got the chance to raise me at all. Justice followed swiftly. Nurse Grace was arrested at her home, standing quietly as officers read her rights, offering no resistance. I'm ready, she told them. I've been ready to face this for 25 years. I just didn't have the courage until now. She was stripped of her nursing license, finally facing the consequences she had run from for a quarter of a century. Colonel Bako stood before a military tribunal and resigned every honor he had ever earned. I don't ask for leniency, he told the panel. I only ask that whatever happens to me doesn't fall on my son. He carried none of this guilt. He deserves none of this punishment. He accepted full legal responsibility, refusing to hide behind rank or reputation. The hospital, shaken to its core by the scandal, overhauled its maternity security procedures within the month. New national legislation was passed to protect newborns from ever suffering this fate again. A law that, fittingly, would carry General Adanna's name. General Adanna returned to the small grave one final time, not to mourn, but to release it. She lifted the wilted flowers she'd left the year before and knelt slowly, planting new ones in their place. You gave me 25 years of practice loving a son I thought I'd lost, she whispered to the empty ground, her hand resting on the stone. Whoever you were, little one, thank you for teaching me not to stop hoping. You can rest now. Your brother is home. Kofi visited both houses that had shaped him. In one, he sat across from a woman who had grieved him for 25 years and called her mother, watching her face light up every single time. In the other, he sat across from a man serving out his sentence with quiet dignity and still called him father, even when it was hard, even when part of him wondered if he should. Slowly, painfully, unevenly, the family began to heal. Beneath the ancient baobab tree that evening, Elder Namdi gathered the village children as he always did. A stolen child may grow in another home, he told them, but blood never forgets its path. Wealth can buy silence, fear can delay justice, lies can travel for years, but truth walks patiently. And when it finally arrives, neither kings nor soldiers can command it to turn back. The sun set over General Adanna, Captain Kofi, and Colonel Bako standing together, not untouched by pain, but choosing truth over bitterness and healing over hatred. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in Kofi's place. Like this video if you believe truth always finds its way home. And subscribe now, because this channel brings you one unforgettable story after another, and you will not want to miss what's coming next.